have watched Mick Foley wrestle is a truly unforgettable experience. His sacrificial performances have left blood, skin, and even body parts on multiple continents as he captured the imagination of fans that found themselves unable to turn their heads away. Sounds really nice, doesn't it? Sounds really lovely. While Foley would later win over millions of fans for his wit, charm, and real earnestness, he initially forced himself upon our eyes with absolute mayhem. Whether he was Cactus Jack, Mankind, Dude Love, or just plain old Mick Foley from Long Island, New York, the best-selling author had the ability to spellbind audiences with matches that were cringeworthy in a mostly positive sense. He could tell a story with his mannerisms, his suddenness, his words, and his insatiable sadism, whether portraying a detestable brute or a misunderstood everyman. This versatility has been Mick's calling card, and he could not only change costumes and play a different man every night, he could also hit the extremes on the scale of good and evil. And extreme is a word that sums him up perfectly, as this list is filled to the brim with chaotic performances. But the man helping carry out the chaos is a pro's pro, and one of the all-time greats. There will never be another Mick Foley, as no other wrestler could duplicate each of the matches ahead. I'm Jack from Cultaholic.com, and this is 10 Mick Foley matches you need to see. Join us. Number 10, Cactus Jack vs Terry Funk, IWA-KAWASAKI Dream. This would be the final match of the infamous 1995 King of the Deathmatch tournament, which would achieve plenty of notoriety as a favourite on the old tape trading circuit. Cactus had survived Terry Gordy and Shoji Nakamaki in the earlier rounds, while the grizzled Funk outlasted Leatherface and Tiger Jeet Singh for a chance to battle Cactus for the big trophy. And what a final match it would be. Just a nice easy stipulation here: a barbed wire rope, exploding barbed wire boards, and exploding ring time bomb deathmatch. Both men had taken tumbles onto actual explosives, falls into barbed wire, all preceding the planned big explosion that ended up being a dud. Instead of the ring blowing up like something out of a war zone, the detonation was pretty bad, leading to Cactus and Foley compensating by enduring truly painful landings onto the assorted weaponry, hoping to make good for the disappointing explosion. It's not a great match, but it's a legendary one, required viewing as perhaps the Hulk vs Andre of the deathmatch world. Number 9, Mick Foley vs Triple H, No Way Out 2000. Among the desensitized feeling created by the consequence-free Attitude Era, there wasn't a whole lot of sentimental feeling in the air when it came to bigger moments. But when it looked like Mick Foley had just been retired by Triple H after a brutal Hell in a Cell match, hearts were collectively ripped out of the viewership as a whole. It seemed as though a great career had truly ended. Of course, we now know that Foley came back for WrestleMania 2000, but if he'd stayed retired, he'd have gone out on one hell of a match, falling just short of regaining the WWF Championship in a blood-soaked battle against long-time nemesis Triple H. Barbed wire, flames, and a really terrifying cell spot added to a gritty brawl, in which interest in the challenger could not have been stronger. Everybody wanted Foley to win. But Foley did what he does best, and that's give everything he has to help the star of tomorrow get over just a little bit more. It's safe to say that Triple H wouldn't be the man today if it wasn't for his feud with Foley. It's an emotionally charged war, something Foley did better than pretty much everybody in his generation. Number 8, Cactus Jack vs Randy Orton, Backlash 2004. A few years later, Foley came back from another retirement in order to take part in a rather intriguing feud, this time with a very young Randy Orton. The Legend Killer was by now IC champion, but he lacked that real signature victory on his resume that would catapult him into the stratosphere. That's where Mick Foley came in to help. This was an ideal battle of a proud, respected mauler versus a disrespectful young punk. Orton was sacrificed to the wrestling gods here when he took an unprotected bump onto a sea of thumbtacks, his wide-eyed grimace as real as the pain he felt in that moment. There were many fans at that point who'd seen Orton as nothing more than an overpushed pretty boy, but after this, they came to respect him for the beating he endured en route to victory. It was easily Orton's best match to that point, and it might even be his greatest match ever, and the fact that a hardcore legend 4 years deep into retirement got it out of him shouldn't go unnoticed. Number 7, Cactus Jack vs VADER, Halloween Havoc 1993. Hopefully you like WCW because we're headed there for a little while. First up is a match that Foley had with a man he openly advocated for a Hall of Fame induction prior to Vader's 2018 passing, thus robbing us of a speech from one of wrestling's most gifted monsters. Vader could dish out hellacious beatings and Foley could endure hellacious beatings, so it's little surprise that this was a match made in heaven. The two squared off in a Texas death match at the Halloween Havoc pay-per-view, which, given the nature of the unprotected chair shots to each other's heads in this match, certainly lived up to its ghoulish name. At least there was context and a story here, as Foley was seeking revenge for a brutal head injury inflicted upon him by Vader 6 months earlier. The violence on display was befitting of each man's characters and reputations, and while the ending was a little bit cornball, it's a brawl that still manages to exceed expectations. Number 6, Cactus Jack and Kevin Sullivan versus the Nasty Boys, SLAMBOREE 1994. For this WCW Tag Team title bout, Cactus teamed with fellow sociopath Kevin Sullivan, with legendary NHL roughneck Dave the Hammer Schultz serving as guest referee. The match was in Philadelphia, where Schultz had won 2 Stanley Cups with the Flyers, so the crowd were obviously quite excited to see him. 1 month earlier, Cactus and his partner Max Payne had fallen short in a similarly crazy brawl with the Nasties at Spring Stampede, but this sequel with Kevin Sullivan was just a bit wilder, with some genuine crowd-pleasing moments. Half this match, honestly, is Tony Schiavone and Jesse Ventura laughing incredulously at the unfettered mayhem, all of which is contained in just a 10-minute stretch. There is literally no downtime, as the 4 men brawl throughout the arena, matching the sort of intensity that was taking place inside the ECW arena at pretty much the same time frame. If you haven't seen it, we won't spoil the finish, but let's just say that a series of events occurred that make the crowd extremely happy indeed. As a match, it's a template for the hardcore craze that would soon follow. Number 5, Cactus Jack vs Sting, Beach Blast 1992. Foley personally believed that this was his best match ever, at least for some time. Cactus fought WCW champion Sting in a Falls Count Anywhere match that wasn't even for Sting's belt, because the character of Cactus Jack didn't care about belts all that much of the time. He only wanted to inflict pain. After having an issue with Sting going back to the late summer of '91, it was time to blow off the feud with the only way Cactus Jack knows how: physical destruction. What endured was 10 plus minutes of energetic violence, the kind that probably left legitimate dents in both men's skulls. Cactus and Sting brutalized each other with truly painful spots on the concrete, while barely catching a breather all the while. It made a bigger star out of Sting, who survived an absolute war with heroic guile and courage. It also opened everyone's eyes to just how effective Foley could be, especially with what he was willing to do to help his opponent look very, very impressive. Number 4, Cactus Jack vs Triple H, Royal Rumble 2000. Barbed wire in a WWF ring. Even when the Attitude Era whipped up into sheer anarchy with seemingly no rules of any kind, few would have ever guessed that barbed wire would be put to such liberal use in a Vince McMahon ring. But it was, and the WWE Championship street fight inside Madison Square Garden would set new standards for violence within the promotion. Both men were cut up pretty badly in the early going, especially Triple H, who looked like he'd been bobbing for apples in a vat of ketchup. But they pressed on, determined to make the match into a gruesome masterpiece. By the time Foley got pedigreed face first onto an array of thumbtacks, that goal had certainly been achieved. This win only elevated Triple H, proving that he belonged on the main event level whilst silencing many of his doubters at the same time. You might be noticing a trend here with Foley's matches. How many wrestlers have given just as much as he has? Number 3, Mankind vs The Undertaker, King of the Ring 1998. Yes, I know you've seen this match. You've seen this match 40,000 times. Your parents, who don't even watch wrestling, have seen this match 10,000 times because it's that damn famous. This entry isn't for you. This is for the few people that somehow haven't seen the match. It's a humble reminder that everybody needs to see it, and since you've already seen it 40,000 times, what's the harm in one more? Nobody will ever forget the images of Mankind being thrown to his doom from the top of Hell in a Cell, once as a planned stunt and again on an accidental break in the roof panels. Undertaker may have worked with a busted foot, but that pain was mere child's play compared to the laundry list of bumps that Foley acquired in his repeated brushes with death. The thumbtacks towards the end might feel like overkill given the preceding carnage, but you know, it's hard to imagine the spectacle without them, and the entire spectacle's place in history will never be questioned. Number 2, Mankind vs Shawn Michaels In Your House 10, Mind Games. Upon later examination, Foley came to believe that this match topped his brawl with Sting as his personal best bout ever, and it's pretty hard to argue against it. This WWF Championship bout with Michaels in Philadelphia felt a little bit like a placeholder before Mankind resumed his feud with Undertaker and Michaels moved on as well. But it made damn sure to etch a place in history as a truly awesome main event. This match played to multiple tastes, as Mankind did his damnedest to try and out-wrestle Michaels in a shocking display of skill and grace, but also couldn't help himself from delving into the sort of weapons-based mayhem that is his usual custom. In particular, the bump that both men take through a ringside table is hard to match on account of sheer, unfathomable ballsiness. Ignore the flat ending, this was one of the greatest Foley matches of all time, and certainly one of the best of those darker New Generation days. And finally, number 1, Dude Love vs Stone Cold Steve Austin, Over the Edge 1998. This right here is the template for every chaotic Attitude Era main event that would follow. The crooked referee, the brawling around the arena, the unpredictability, the blood, the nuclear crowd reactions, it's all there. So many future bouts tried to replicate and duplicate the formula on display here, but most would fall a little bit short. This was Attitude perfected, thanks in part to so many consummate pros being on hand, and it's somewhat ironic that Foley's best match would come as Dude Love. WWF champion Austin had to survive not just Dude Love's onslaught, but the biased officiating of Vince McMahon, while his cronies cronies sat there watching at ringside. Undertaker was present to stave off any attempts at a Montreal screwjob redux, while also angling for Austin to pay him back with a title defense. The storytelling was so on point and each dramatic spot bled so well into the next that there was no way to tell how it was going to end. It's a match of very few flaws and can still get the adrenaline pumping more than 20 years later. For Foley, it's a masterpiece, a demonstration of his immeasurable value and a reminder of his generosity. Once more, nobody gave to the business and to their opponents the way that Mick Foley did. In a small way, hopefully, by appreciating all of his great matches, we can give back just a little bit. Thank you very much for listening to this video. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com, and don't forget to leave your favourite Mankind or Dude Love or Cactus Jack or Mick Foley matches in the comments section down below. You can follow me on Twitter if you want to at Jack the Jobber. You can follow all of us at Cultaholic and check out our Patreon as well if you want, patreon.com/Cultaholic. And never forget, of course, if you haven't already, to hit subscribe and to join us.